Hi, and welcome back to another Chameleon Chat. My name is Lorraine, and I have Lisa, the adopted nurse, with me today. Hey, Lisa, it's so nice to have you and get to know you and talk to you. I'm really excited about this today. Would you mind doing an introduction for people that may not know you?
Sure. Thanks, Lorraine, for having me, and it is so good to be here with you today. My name is Lisa Chism. I'm a nurse practitioner. Been a nurse practitioner about 30 years, and I'm 57 years old, and I am adopted. And I'm excited to talk with you today about our experiences that are probably fairly similar
Yeah.
and just share with folks my story, how my profession and my story being an adoptee intersect, and hopefully provide insights and support for folks.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, we are. We're very close in age. I'm a little bit older than you. That would put us both in the baby scoop era. And you had said something that you had, was it recently discovered the baby scoop era?
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
I read Gretchen Sisson's book,
Yes.
and I'm probably three-quarters of the way through it. And when I read about the baby scoop era, I think it's what, 1950 to 1970, and I was born in 68. And when I read about how women were often either coerced or sent away and really not given any option, given the times, given the history of what was going on, or religious backgrounds. My birth mother was Catholic, and I was adopted through Catholic Social Services.
Okay.
And she was actually sent away to Marilec, which stood for without marriage or lack of marriage, home for unwed mothers. And she was told by my birth grandfather, don't come home with that baby, or you can't come home. She was 19. So I learned that in my 30s when I actually, fortunately, was able to find information out about my birth mother's side. But when I read about this in Gretchen's book, it was overwhelming because I had not heard of the baby scoop era. I had not really understood just how much pressure women during that time frame, and I'm certain in some cases still are in these types of situations, but it was incredible to read that and identify with that and sad and grief on a whole new level. And they talk about the fog lifting. It was another layer of that because that's something I had never really understood growing up.
Absolutely. I had the same experience when I learned the baby scoop era. I was always under some, well, fog, wasn't I? Um, that my birth mother loved me and wanted me and stuff, but she never would answer my letters. Because, again, like you, once I was allowed the information, once it was open in my state, I did try to reach out to her and I never heard from her. And I couldn't understand why. I was like, that makes absolutely no sense because I know she would want to talk to me. And of course, I found out about the baby scoop era. And for people that don't know about the baby scoop era, I would highly recommend looking that up or reading Gretchen Sisson's book because that's a really, really good book to read. And do some research because this is a part of history that is hidden for the most part. It's not talked about. It did happen worldwide. It happened after World War II. There was an explosion of children, and women didn't have rights. Like some people, some women weren't allowed credit cards, couldn't buy houses without their parents, father or something like that. In the United States, and that wasn't that long ago, which blows my mind too. And they're
Mhm.
trying to, well, we won't digress onto that because things are kind of getting sketch right now, aren't they? But that time frame was just swept away, and then Roe came around, and birth control became more readily available, and then obviously unwed mothers weren't as shunned as they were because my mother was sent away too. So it was the
Mhm.
same. It wasn't through the Catholic charities. Well, it was, but it ended up going through a Methodist. But Anyway, she went away to a cousin, and she was also 19, almost 20. She was in college. My dad was in college to be an engineer, and I can't remember what she was in college to be. And then Vietnam War came along. 9 months later, I was born after he left. And yeah, it was just hush hush, never spoken about again. And I don't know, did you get reunion?
So, what I found out in my mid 30s was so ironically, my birth grandmother passed away. And then that same day, I contacted Catholic Social Services, or it was Catholic Charities, I think, when I was a baby. And what they told me first was more ethnic information. And then
Yeah.
about 3 weeks later, I got the phone call, actually a message. I was at work in a practice I was in at the time, a family practice, and seeing patients. And I checked my phone on my lunch, and there's a message from the social worker at Catholic Social Services that said, Lisa, I have identifying information for you.
Mm,
And I had no idea I was going to get identifying information. So I closed the door to my office and I called her back. And she said, well, your birth grandmother and your birth aunt consented for their information to be given in 1990. So that was probably 17 years or so beforehand, because I was about 35, 36 years old. My mom had just died about maybe 4 or 5 years before. No, maybe about 3 years. She died at 32, when I was 32, right before I had my baby, right before I had Izzy. And yeah, she died 5 days before.
mm,
So I never really felt like I could search. And it wasn't from anything she said in particular. It was just this overwhelming sense of chosen. I'm thankful. I can't let them know that I want to know.
yeah.
So she passed away, and a couple of years later, I felt like I could do this. Fast forward to this phone call, and I called back the social worker, and she started telling me about my birth grandmother and my aunt. And I said, well, what about my birth mother? And she very casually said, well, she died. She died when she was 26. And I felt the bottom fall out of my world. Like I couldn't feel the ground. I started sobbing, head on the
Mm,
desk. Somebody even knocked on my door and said, are you okay? And then she casually said, oh, I'm so sorry. And I just was shocked. And that has never left me.
mm,
And to this day, one of the things that I do in my role as a nurse practitioner is I give women their results of their breast biopsies. So I have to tell women on a regular basis that they have breast cancer.
mm,
And in the oncology world, we believe in the spikes model when we give difficult news. And S stands for setting. So women are in my office, which is a really pretty soft lighting, a nice pink couch, quiet environment. And I talk with them sitting across from them. I'm right there. I'm walking with them as I tell them. And it struck me so much the way she so casually said this, because all my life to this point, I'd wondered, I'd hoped, just like you mentioned, and always thought about her on my birthday. Today, she must remember me. She must remember that she gave a baby up.
mhm,
Anyways, so that was how I found that out. The good news is that my aunts and my uncle, my grandmother had passed away, and my aunts and my uncle were amazing. And it was a good reunion, and they're in my life still. My uncle passed away a couple years ago. My dad was still alive. My adoptive dad was still alive, and a kind, sweet, gentle soul. And he actually got to meet my aunt. And that was very surreal to watch the two of them in the driveway where I grew up stand
mm,
across from each other, and she reached out and took his hands and said, thank you for taking such good care of our Lisa. And my name was Michelle Marie, but my aunt actually called me that the first time I met her, and it didn't feel right. So I told her I wasn't super comfortable with that, to stick with Lisa. So she respected that. And I'll never forget
Good.
that. My dad's eyes filled up with tears. He couldn't even talk because he was just so moved. So
Wow.
that reunion story is a good one.
Yeah.
It isn't good too. So, but
Yeah, that is. And thank you for being trauma informed when you're talking to those women. That must be why you have all those awards and things that I read about. It sounds like you are truly a compassionate nurse that understands and empathizes with people in very difficult situations sometimes, right?
Yes, yes. I'm working on my actual certificate in as a trauma informed care practitioner. I'm probably about 75% of the way through in my spare time.
Yeah, I'm sure you have all sorts of spare time, right?
Yeah, I'm working on it, but I'm learning, and it's some of it is somewhat second nature for me as a nurse,
Mhm.
but a lot of it is it's very eye-opening, and especially what I've learned more recently as an adoptee, the research I've done looking at the trauma that can happen that you don't realize as an infant when you're an infant adoptee that trauma can stay with you and things I had not ever understood before the way I'm beginning to understand now.
Yeah, I'm a trauma informed embodiment coach. I'm also a trauma informed yoga instructor too. So I've gone through a couple of different trainings to learn about trauma and polyvagal theory and the nervous system and our brain and our chakras and all of it
It's
and how
amazing. Yeah, it's fascinating.
everything works together. And it was absolutely fascinating.
Mhm.
And it's like now I can sit there and handle those comments a lot easier because I understand what's going on inside the person when they're reacting, because
Yep.
that's what they're doing is they're being very reactive instead of responding. And it's coming from a different part of the brain. And I understand that. And I also understand what their nervous system is doing. So it's like what you're going through. We understand that this is like a reaction in the nervous system. It's not to blame somebody for behaving badly sometimes and reacting in a way, very snippy, very short. But at the same time, we also understand that everybody's responsible for the way they behave, right? Even if it is trauma. So it's an interesting place to be when you can understand both sides, right?
Mhm.
What part of the training have you enjoyed or thought about, or has it connected with you?
Well, I'm just now getting to screening and assessment. But what I've really liked is just some of the simple things you can do in the moment to try and help someone come down when they're acutely traumatized. I think speaking as an adoptee, the trauma is there from before.
Mhm.
Some of it for me was in the moment when my birth father came into my life. Um, but when I'm talking with my patients and I'm giving them difficult news, it's in the moment. And so,
Right.
how do I help them kind of come down, walk with them, sit with them? And if they react, as you say, in anger, because they're angry, they're getting this diagnosis, realizing this is not about me.
Mhm.
This is unfortunately really difficult news to hear. I think the best part for me with the training is more techniques, more response mechanisms, more things we can do right in the moment, mindfulness, being present.
Mhm.
And I think that's because for me, being a nurse practitioner and really being focused on how can I fix this? I can't fix the diagnosis, but I can help whatever I can do to help them in the moment to be able to be with me so that they can take in as much information as they can because
Yeah.
it's a lot of information that, we're giving them. And they're
Yeah.
only going to hear so much once they hear something difficult. I mean, I think about that day when the social worker said that to me. I don't really remember what else she said past that.
Hmm. That's
So,
true because it's like a
right?
shock to your system and your cognition becomes impaired for a while and you go back into the reptilian brain and it's
Hmm.
fight flight. So,
Fight or flight. Yep.
right, you're not actually taking in much information after that shocking news, like she just blurted out to you, obviously. I mean, that was a normal reaction that you had. Her thinking that you wouldn't have that kind of reaction is what was odd about that. And being adoptees, and when we're talking about adoption trauma, this is one of the big points, right? Is people think that we're just, why don't you just get over it? You know, you're old.
Oh,
I get that when you're old. Why aren't you over it? And I'm like, well, number one, trauma doesn't know time. And, there's a lot
yeah.
of, and not talking about it is how you get the symptoms, right? The depression, the anxiety, and the overwhelm, the reactivity.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it to me, one of the things I heard along the way more recently is, stop playing the victim.
Oh, yeah. Or I always heard, well, someone else has it worse, which is true, which is why logically I would be like, well, they're right. My adopted parents would say that all the time if I was upset about pretty much anything. Well, someone else has it worse. And I was like, well, that's logically true. So my logical brain would be like, see, you just need to ignore that. But that's not how you get better. You
Hmm.
can't just deny it all of your life. Eventually, something's going to happen, either physically, right?
Yeah.
Or mentally. It's going to, your body in the physical form is something's going to happen. Something's
Oh,
going
for
to give
sure.
eventually. Yeah.
What is it they say? The body keeps the score.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I teach the embodiment classes, because as an adoptee, it was easier for me to work with the body and allow things to come out slowly than it was to just talk to somebody. Because when I was talking to people, and I love my therapist, by the way, and I still go to therapy, I still do cognitive
Total,
therapy.
yeah. I've been in
But
therapy for
talking
5 years.
about it over and over, I was just like, this is like reliving it. And it's
Right.
like, I don't want to, go there sometimes. And I would find myself being angrier after talking about
Hmm.
it and stuff. So working with the body, and you literally do have to move your body to let that trauma integrate, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the process.
It is. And we need both. I always say we need both, the top down and the bottom up, to truly get through complex trauma.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'm learning a lot and hopefully translating it to practice.
Oh, it sounds like it. I love talking about this. I'm glad that we can have this kind of discussion, because uh, people assume that nurses and doctors have been trauma informed in college. And yeah, do you
No,
want to speak to that?
no, it's not at all part of it's definitely wasn't part of my training either, as a nurse or a nurse practitioner. I think we get, psych mental health types of things are integrated throughout our programs, and some more heavier depending on what your specialty is. But actual trauma-informed care is not. And I think fortunately, I hear more and more folks be much more open. And one of my goals is we have 40 providers in our practice. It's a large private OBGYN practice, but I'm part of the breast center that's part of this large practice. But we have 40 OBGYN providers, and I'm hoping to be able to teach them and do a course for them, or at least even just a lecture
Hmm.
where we talk about trauma-informed care so that I can take some of what I've learned and give it to them to take as tools, because they're taking care of women. You can't take care of women and not meet women every day, all day long in your practice who have some form of trauma.
Right.
So I think being able to integrate that into practice across the spectrum of women's health, especially now. I do work in the menopause space, and
Mm.
there's a place where there's a lot of trauma because women have been gaslit for so many years to just deal with their symptoms,
Yep.
and you'll get through it, or it's just menopause. Unfortunately, being part of that space as well, I'm witnessing an incredible movement in women's health and an incredible movement in the menopause space where that's not the case anymore. And women are much more proactively, more often coming forward. I'd like to see that happen in the adoptee space. And I think we're starting to see that. I don't know if social media probably has moved the needle quite a bit, where
Hmm.
folks don't feel quite so in a silo. They can start to talk about their experiences. So I think across the spectrum, I am always interested in how my worlds intersect as an adoptee and as a nurse and a nurse practitioner. So I'd like to see this movement where everyone in the adoption constellation is more aware of trauma-informed care. When folks talk about adoptive parents, I had a patient today who's an adoptive parent, and I we talked about trauma-informed care. It just organically came up.
Hmm. Good
And
for you.
yeah, and I told her, I said, it's so important to be trauma informed, don't you think? And she said, yes, I do. Her son is 5, so a more recent open adoption. And just as an adoptee talking to her, I'm a nurse practitioner, but now I'm also speaking from this whole other lens.
Yeah.
And to me, it fascinates me when the worlds intersect.
Absolutely. I mean, you're in a unique place, and I love that. I am working with some people in the medical field here in my state, trying to get people to take this training, this National Institute training for adoption, and it's free, but we're trying to get it to more people so that they understand trauma informed care. It's a good training. I think there can be adjustments to it, just like any kind of training. As things
Mhm.
are progress, like you said, social media has changed things, and I know it has because when I started back in 2019 talking about these things, there was just a handful of us, and now it's everywhere. And that's exactly what needs to happen is
Mhm.
people need to speak up and tell their stories because adoptees have a higher than normal rate of suicide and addiction, mental health care in prison. And this is an actual statistical thing that we can show that goes back to trauma. So as of right now, the US, the adoption industry for like infants is $25 billion a year. And it's the National Adoption Council, not council, I always get the acronyms wrong, but they just posted on social media saying that it was for family building when it's not supposed to be. And that's where people are saying that it's not trauma, but then adoption agencies actually are saying it's trauma now and saying, but we'll help you with the trauma after we get you a baby to adopt. So it's like we have turned that needle, but they keep turning it back because it is an industry. And I get
Mhm.
pushed back all the time about that. And it's like, no, it's an actual industry. Other countries have lessened their adoptions, and here they're trying to promote it and get more. And so the trauma comes in that at a generational level, right?
Mhm.
Because we're not helping not only the adopted parents, because if they have infertility or whatever issues that they can't have their own children, just adopting, because this is what I wanted to talk to you about. Lots of times, if a woman finds out that she's pregnant and she's with an OBGYN or something, they go, well, you can just put the child up for adoption. Just like it's this easy thing. And that's
Mhm.
where this trauma informed care comes in, right? No one should be just saying, well, you can just adopt. You could be saying, let me get you some information to look over and get transparent information, like from Saving Our Sisters and the Family
Mhm.
Preservation Project, because lots of places will send you to it looks like it's to help the mothers, but it's actually just funneling them right to like Gladney and the big adoption agencies. Have you come across that? People saying anything like that in the medical field is like, well, you can just relinquish the baby then.
Well, for me, I take care of women who either are not childbearing
Oh,
or are
okay.
coming in more for like a breast
Gotcha.
concern. But speaking to that, I think that's where Gretchen's book was so
Yes.
eye-opening
So
because
good.
even myself, not really having the appreciation of the trauma that birth mothers or birth parents go through, I was just blown away. And it just makes so much sense now that I've learned from my aunts what I have learned about my birth mom
Mhm.
and what she went through. reading Gretchen's book was like reading those stories in some way or another. Each one of them reminded me in a different way of what I'd heard about my birth mother. And I think for me personally, should I be in a situation where I was talking with a woman who was faced with an unplanned pregnancy, I probably was not anywhere near as informed as I could have been up until the last, I don't know, several months to couple of years on my journey more recently, where now I feel like I can be a better practitioner and a better provider, where I can say very transparently, even that is going to be a difficult road for you. If that is what you choose, then we need to make sure you have the resources to deal
Hmm.
with the grief, to deal with how you're going to feel. And I think what really, when you're speaking about the industry and the what's been done more recently with regard to there really isn't as many closed adoptions as say when you and I were
Right.
relinquished. Now it almost seems that the open adoption is used as a way to soften
Hmm.
or make it more appealing to birth moms,
Right.
but they have no control over that. And I think that's what's really my awareness of that has just, I'm just blown away by that and the reality of that. So, should I be faced with talking with someone who's looking at an unplanned pregnancy? My conversation is definitely different or would be different now that I've learned as much as I've learned.
Yeah, I've gone to a cub retreat, which is Concerned United Birth Parents. So I learned a lot from that. I just did a Chameleon Chat with Renee Gillen from Saving Our Sisters and Katie Burns
All that,
from the
yeah.
Family Preservation Project and Lisa Lane Scott, which she's an adoptee like us. But she's doing the documentary, All You Have Is Love, about those organizations. And being around the birth mothers and learning the statistics, like birth mothers also have a very, very high suicide rate. Open adoptions typically close within the first 3 to 5 years. They don't tell you that. They've also, adoption agencies will pretty much ship mothers to states like Utah that have no revocation period. Nowhere would anyone allow someone to sign a contract when they just came out of surgery. And these women literally are giving birth and they're putting a pen in their hand to sign adoption papers that they can't undo. And this is a lifelong contract, not only for them, but for their baby,
Hmm.
which doesn't have any consent. But I mean, I don't even see how this is even remotely legal, having someone sign a contract when they still have anesthesia and I mean literally just giving birth. I mean your whole body and everything needs that period. Would you talk to that a little bit, since this is more your
100%.
field than mine?
Yeah, as someone who, I shared that my adoptive mom died 5 days before Izzy was born. And when I think about how I felt then and the emotions, the grief, it's not the same. But if you think about grief and trauma, I was incredibly traumatized. She died in front of me. It was unexpected. I went into labor that night and thankfully it was stopped. And then I did end up having Izzy about 3 weeks premature.
Mm.
Certainly, I'm sure because of the trauma. So when I think about the trauma I was experiencing having lost my mom, I cannot imagine the trauma that a birth mother is going through. And my birth mother wrote poems to me while she was at the home, and I fortunately have them because my aunt saved her journal. And one she started before she gave birth, and she finished it after. And I mean, you can just now that I know what I know, and even reading that poem several, 20 some years ago, it's overwhelming. I cannot imagine how you could put someone in that situation. I agree with you 100%. It doesn't even seem humane. And I'm certain and to be open that there are probably circumstances where women are able to consent and do
Mhm.
feel okay about their decision to relinquish. I'm certain that that happens as well. Um, there are all kinds of stories, including good. But to me, not having some sort of grace period, some sort of time frame.
Right.
I take care of women who are menopausal. We'll talk about hormones, their declining levels of estrogen and progesterone and how it's making them feel, or perimenopausal, up and down and up and down. And
Mhm.
they literally will say to me, I don't even feel like myself. That's just, a probably narrow example of right after having giving birth.
Right.
So I agree with you. I think there definitely should be a time frame. It may still end up being what someone decides
Right.
is right for them. But in that very traumatic situation with all of the hormone changes, um, the oxytocin surging, you just gave birth,
Mhm.
the love hormones,
Mhm.
the just the pure chemistry of it all,
Right.
it seems cruel to not have some sort of, with all that we know in science,
Mhm.
with all that we know in medicine, why would that be okay?
Right. And other countries do it differently. I mean, I was trying to think about, there was a one country, I believe the baby goes home with the mother for 6 weeks or so, even before they sign any kind of papers. Also, the pre-birth matching, that's a coercion tactic, 100%, because once you know you've been matched with a couple, you feel like you owe them the baby. And if there's any kind of gifts that they give, they'll sometimes say, well, now you owe for X, Y, and Z because, we bought that for you or we paid that, even though it's supposed to be a gift. And one of the other things that they do is they don't tell birth mothers to get their own lawyer. Oftentimes, the adoptive parents say the lawyer is for both of us, and that you can't do that. I mean, that is straight up illegal, but it happens all the time. And these are the things about the adoption industry that people don't understand.
Mhm.
They understand the trauma, but they are trying to say stay God, I can't talk, stay sustainable instead of putting themselves out of business, which is, if it was child welfare, that would be the end goal is, hey, no one needs us anymore. We have, helped generational trauma. We've stopped perpetuating it. We've figured out a way to help people from the get-go so that, people aren't relinquishing babies and, families aren't losing their children to foster care and then eventually to adoption. So I hope that more people become trauma informed, and thank you for teaching. I hope you let me know when that happens and stuff, because I want to talk to you more about that. Um, I did want to go back because you had said that you had done ancestry for
Mhm.
your discovery. So I did want to talk to that because now we know you've had a reunion, but some people don't know what adoptees go through to
Mhm.
actually make these things happen. So I wanted to hear your story on that.
Yeah, so in my 30s, that was really all I thought I was going to be able to do. And boy, making that phone call was just because
Mm.
it's ingrained in you with closed adoptions. It's sealed. You're never going to know. So fast forward to my early 50s, my daughter thought it would be fun to get us Ancestry DNA kits for Christmas. And I really, honestly, completely naive, didn't think anything of it. And she did it. She and my husband did it first. And I have really bad dry mouth. So the idea of sending a test tube full of spit, like, not going to happen. So I thought, okay, you guys do it. I didn't give it a second thought. I mean, you want to talk about, really very naive about this. And I was told by my birth aunts that when I was first told I was adopted by my mom, that she was raped, but she knew the guy. That was all I knew. And then I did talk to my aunts about that, and my one aunt said she was home one day when my birth mother, and they were 6 years apart. They were 13, and my birth mom was 19 when she had me. So my one aunt was home when she came home one night, and she relayed a story of her crying, nylons ripped, um, said that she was raped, and then lo and behold, a pregnancy. And the rape story was very much part of the story. My birth grandmother, very much. So I honestly, I don't know if it was a sign of the times and the shame, or was there really a rape? And I really don't know. I don't know that I'll ever really know the truth. But I was told that, and then my aunt gave me that information. And as far as they knew, no one knew who my birth father was. So I honestly just wrote it off to I'll never know. And I was thankful for the fact that I have aunts and an uncle that are in my life. So my daughter gets the Ancestry DNA kits. She sends off hers. And one night we're sitting there about 11:30 at night. She's scrolling on her phone. She'd already loaded in the app. And she says, "Oh my gosh, my results are in." And I'm like, "Oh, what are we?" Because now I get to know what I am more, We know
Yeah,
what
yeah.
my husband is, but what am I? And she pulls up and she said, "Who's this guy?" And I looked over and I said, and all I could think of was, I know everybody on the Thomas side. Like this is 20 years later. I know everybody. I know what could it be? Who could this be? And she looked at me. She looked up how strong the relationship was, and it was probable grandparent.
Mm,
And I looked at her and she looked at me, and like simultaneously, oh my God, it's my birth father. So, of course, there's a picture and a name. Again, naive, and I had no idea that there was a way to hide your information. So here I am. And I'm going about my business. I did do a background check. I paid for an actual background check because of
mm-hmm,
the rape story. I was like, what am I dealing with here?
mm-hmm.
What do I need to be prepared for?
Right.
And nothing seemed overly, there were no red flags. And I had a brother, which now I know I have a brother, but I have no way of really getting in touch with him because I know that if I get in touch with him, he's not going to know about me more than likely, and that's going to open up that can of worms. What does that look like? My birth father was married. Am I going to disrupt a marriage? Like, what does this mean? So I think there's more awareness around that now, but this was 5 years ago, and I don't think anyone was talking about it. I certainly did not, in any sense, think about the impact of what if you find something or someone finds you.
Yeah.
Now I'm dealing with this. This is what I compare it to when I counsel women about having genetic testing to see if they have a mutation for breast cancer. I say to them, it's a personal choice. You're eligible, but you can't unknow that information. And if you find out you have a mutation, then you're faced with a lot of choices. So I want you to take a minute and think about it. I support you whichever way you go.
Mhm.
I think that's the conversation folks who have ancestry or do ancestry need to have is you cannot unknow. So
Right.
I felt almost like I didn't really consent because I didn't really understand what I was about to learn or what I
Mhm.
could potentially learn. So I let it sit, and in the back of my mind is the little worm in my ear going, he might know about you and he doesn't care. Or does he not know? Does he see it? Is he getting the alert? Because in the meantime, I'm getting these alerts. You have a match, you have a match, you have a match. So now we've got cousins and we've got, distant relatives. And so
Uh-huh.
I'm, in the back of my mind, is he getting this? Is he getting this? Well, it was about 8 months later. I looked down at my phone and it said you have a message from his name. And I again, it was a very surreal experience. It felt a lot like it did when I found out there was identifying information about my birth mother. And he reached out and he said, this is my phone number. I understand we have a relationship on Ancestry DNA. If you don't contact me, I understand. Well, that next thing you know, he had left an email, so I emailed and I immediately got a response. I ended up talking with him for the first time the next day. And I asked him immediately, I said, I have something I have to ask you, and you're probably not going to like it. And he said, what's that? And I said, my birth mother said that you raped her. And it was silence. And then he proceeded with a very detailed story about how that didn't happen and that he barely remembered her, but that he was certain that didn't happen. And at the time, I wanted a different story. I wanted a different narrative. And I took it and ran with it and said, well, he said it didn't happen. But you want to talk about flooded with neurohormones and oxytocin and
Mhm.
emotion. And I was so overwhelmed and flooded with the fact that I was actually talking to my birth father that I thought I would never know, record sealed, and then died with my birth mother.
Mhm.
And I just ran down that rabbit hole and for all it was worth. And it took me on an extremely painful journey. He's not in my life now. Honestly, more his choice than mine, although it's probably very healthy for me
Okay.
that he's not. But his wife was not happy about this.
I
And
hear this
yeah,
story
do
kind of
you?
often. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and unfortunately, for many reasons, I'm sure that I don't understand and may never understand, he shared with me everything she said, every conversation. It was extremely painful. And I tried with everything I had to forge a relationship. In the beginning, it was like a fairy tale, but it soon became extremely painful, probably 6, 8 months in. And eventually, he is an alcoholic, and I didn't know that. And he started drinking, and I didn't really understand that. And because I hadn't experienced that in my personal life with anyone close to me. As a clinician, I understand it, but I had not experienced what can happen, the abuse and the manipulation. And eventually, I believe he was given an ultimatum, and I was on the losing side of that. So, but again, it's probably a healthier place for me. And you mentioned therapy. I've been in therapy since he came into my life, and it has been a game changer. And it's not for the faint of heart. Reunion does not always well.
Ooh, yeah. Reunion is, yeah, you get every feeling just thrown at you all at once. And uh, I didn't even know if I was going to survive. It was a lot. It was
I completely understand that.
insane. Half the time I thought I was losing my mind
Yep,
and I couldn't pick an emotion to
yep.
stick
A
with.
a
It was
100%.
crazy.
There are no words for it. There are no
No.
words for that experience. And folks looking on the outside, they told me later, Lisa, we just needed to let you go through it, but we were worried and we saw the red
Hmm.
flags, and I wouldn't have listened. My husband to this day, he says, I wish I would have protected you more. You couldn't. I would have told you, never mind. I just
Yeah.
don't. I would have rejected you, before I would have not gone down this journey. I would have said, no, I'm not listening to you. So he chose
Yeah.
to, be supportive, but the signs were there that it was, but I didn't. You don't want to see them.
Yeah.
You just want to believe the fairy tale so bad. You just
Right.
want that peace. You want that connection, especially when you like we grow up,
Right.
thinking we're never going to know,
Oh
right? So
yeah. Mine was the
it's so,
same.
yep,
I wasn't sure I was ever going to find him, and then I had 3 years with him, and yeah, closed adoptions. People still don't realize, but yeah, closed adoptions are still legal. I think it's 19 states
so
still have
even
completely closed adoptions, and adoptees, I'm sorry, 19 states that adoptees still can't get their records from. Yeah. So it's still completely closed, and it's 2025 as of this recording right now. That's
yeah,
still absolutely a thing. And we're sitting here telling you, I mean, the shock of learning your heritage and being denied these things that, I mean, Ancestry and 23andMe, made these companies out of people finding their heritage.
hmm
And it seems so normal for other people, but if adoptee looks, we're ungrateful, right? Like you,
hmm
like you wrote down, and I wrote down from your notes, chosen. We were chosen,
hmm
right?
yep.
And I'm going to let you tell your chosen story, but I want to tell you mine real quick. The chosen story was this is what my adopted mother used to tell me the story. She was like, oh yeah, we got, me and your dad wanted a boy, but we got a phone call one day and they said, we have a little girl, do you want that one? And she said, yep. And I'm like going, as a kid, when I'm listening to this, I know that she wasn't trying to hurt me, but I'm just sitting here going, okay, so you wanted a boy and you didn't get that, and you couldn't have your own kid, so you didn't get that, and then you got me. So where was I on this, hierarchy of want? Because
Yeah.
that's what it was. It was a want. She couldn't, she had a forced hysterectomy and she couldn't have children. All she ever wanted was children. I mean,
Hmm.
she was obsessed with babies, and she was until the day she died. She always loved babies, 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 babies. And that's what a lot of this is that obsession with the baby experience.
Hmm.
Yeah. But anyway, I want you to tell your chosen story
Yeah.
because I thought that
I
one was always kind of funny.
I think it's fairly similar situation where my mom was faced with infertility, endometriosis, hysterectomy, wanted a child, and they get the phone call. We have a little girl. I think she wanted a girl.
Okay.
Um, and I will say this, I did have amazing parents. And I think if I were able to talk with them now, they're both gone, and if I were able to talk with them and share a lot of this with them, I think my parents would have wanted to be part of the solution. I really
Yeah.
believe that with all my heart. And um, I think had they known how important, my mom did say to me one time, if you ever want to look, I'll help you. And I believe her, but there's just something about feeling almost rescued
Hmm.
because that's how you feel. And no one, I don't think folks mean any harm
Right.
in the chosen or the your birth mother loved you so much she wanted you to have a better life. And
Hmm.
maybe there's truth to that. Um, and my poor birth mom died at 26, and I wonder how much trauma was, she died of leukemia. How much of that was trauma?
Yeah.
The body keeps the score. But um, I I believe in my heart she probably would have helped me, but that narrative of we loved you so much, and you were chosen, it's said in a way, and I think in my situation, it truly was said in a way to make me feel loved, and I was loved.
Hmm.
But the harms that come from that are what is hard to talk about because you're not always given that space
Right.
for folks to say or understand what that really means. I did a blog for rewriting adoption,
Hmm.
and they did a little piece, promoting the blog, and they talked about growing up chosen, and it's my voice with a quote about growing up chosen, and someone wrote in, "What's wrong with being chosen?" And so I think it's that same lack of understanding of, but what does that really mean?
Right.
There's no space for not being perfect. I talk about being grateful and perfect. If I'm not perfect, will I be unchosen? And
Right.
they never said or did anything to make me feel that way. The situation makes you feel that way.
Right. Right.
And it's not necessarily, it's not their fault. I don't really honestly blame anyone. It's just raising the awareness. What do we do about that? And how do we give folks space to feel that way?
Right.
And permission to feel that way. My therapist said to me one time, she said, Lisa, you feel you always have to work for relationships. And what an aha moment at 50 some
Mm,
years old when I thought, I do
yeah.
feel even, and I can't take that away. I can't undo that. I have to work for relationships because I don't want to be unchosen.
Right. We don't want to betray our adoptive parents, even though they've never made us feel that way. And it is because of an obligation feeling, at least for me. I'll speak for me.
Yeah.
But that's why I never pursued a reunion harder when my adoptive parents were alive. It was until they passed. And then I was like, I felt free to do
Mhm.
what I wanted to do all my life, even though my adoptive parents love me too,
Mhm.
very much. But I still had questions. And
Mhm.
my adoptive parents also said, if you ever want to look, we'll help you. I'm sure they meant that also. But a part of me also knew that it would hurt them really
Mhm.
bad. And I think like you said, I think if my adopted parents were here now and they saw what I was doing and stuff, I think it would hurt my mother somewhat, but I think she would come around, and I think my dad would actually be very proud of me.
Yeah,
Because I think that they would get it. I think that we could have a conversation, just like you said. And it's too bad that we didn't get to have that when they were alive, right?
right.
And that's
I
why
think,
that, yeah, one of the
I think,
reasons why I talk about it now is so that people can do this while everybody's living,
yes,
and not do it and say, I wish I could have.
I think you're 100% right. Because I think about when my dad met my birth aunt. When I first told him I was looking and had gotten information, I saw his face. It fell. But I mean, I can empathize with that, the fear and the wonder. And I told him it was just to get medical history, which I think I was telling myself sort of that
Hmm.
really, how do you really do that? You can't really go down that road without knowing you may end up with more. And what are you going to do with that? So he accepted that. And then I told him that what I learned. And at one point, after I'd already met my aunts and my uncle, I'd gone to visit my uncle. He talked to my uncle on the phone, and my uncle was a larger than life guy. He was amazing. His name was JT Thomas, and he was a race car driver. And
Oh,
he,
wow.
in Hollywood, he taught Paul Newman how to drive for the movie
What?
Le Mans, and he raced Porsches. Amazing. He was just larger than life personality. He was a beautiful person and amazing to me. And my dad was, he said to me one day, he said, "You only have me. I don't have any siblings other than, discovered my brother later." He said, "I'm happy because now you have more family." And I know he meant that. So
Yeah.
I think you're right. Your dad probably, your perception, your parents,
Hmm.
and your perception is probably right on because I really didn't know how much my dad would be okay with it, but then he was.
Yeah.
And, maybe giving him space to kind of
Oh, yeah.
gradually, it's for medical information, it's medical history, Dad. I have a daughter, I want to know. And then gradually him seeing that, well, these people are okay, they're good people, and nothing bad's going to happen to my daughter because of this. It probably would have broke my parents' heart to see me go through what I went through with my birth father because that was hard for my daughter and my husband to watch. And that would have probably brought out Mama Bear and Papa Bear, and they probably would have been
Hmm.
pretty upset about it. Given that all they tried to do their whole life was make sure I knew that I was loved, and then you have a birth parent that was, abusive. But anyways, I think you're spot on, and I think that the most important thing I hope people can start to understand when adoptees speak about these things is we just want to raise the awareness and have the space to have these feelings
Right.
without being shot down.
Yeah. Have the conversation, which is a perfect way to segue to the end because if you don't know, Lisa is an author, and I wanted to know what was the reason that you decided to write a book to have that conversation?
Well, I started writing about a year ago in January. Why did I write the book? I felt like I had to tell my story because I felt like if other people must be experiencing a lot of these feelings, and if they understand how normal these feelings are, if they can relate to someone else who is, in some ways, we feel like we're in a silo. But in other ways, the minute we have conversations with others, adoptees, anyone in the constellation, it's just such a, oh my gosh, I feel that way too. Oh, that happened to me too. Oh, I can understand that. Or my experience. Sharing the story is so powerful. It's going to inform folks like what's going on now in the space. And it's also so therapeutic for us to be
Mhm.
able to share. And
Healing.
instead of feeling, yes, in healing, and instead of feeling in a silo, knowing that we are not alone. We may have different stories, but
Hmm.
all our stories matter. And in some ways, there's threads in the web that ties us all together in a way that we may not have felt that kind of community before. So that's what prompted me to write. I felt like I had a story to tell. And for me, I being a nurse is so ingrained in who I am that I couldn't tell the story without pulling in my life experiences, becoming a caregiver very early on, young in my life, and then formally becoming a caregiver by becoming a nurse, and then my journey as a nurse practitioner, and now working with women and folks, and how much what has happened to me or what I've experienced can translate in so many different ways into what I'm doing and talking with women and taking care of women now. So there was just so many reasons why, and why it was really important to me to tie all of that together. And even now, something that's really impacting me is realizing that how much family history informs how we screen folks, especially for me in the breast cancer screening and prevention world. Um, Not knowing your family history, and how many times I ask a woman, "Do you have any family history of breast cancer?" And I'm told, "I don't know, I'm adopted."
Yeah.
It just was so impactful. And I thought, I have to tell my story. There's just so many ways that this intersects, and that we are so connected in so many ways that we don't realize.
Well, I am glad that you told your story. Will you tell everybody where they can get your book?
Sure. It's on Amazon, The Adopted Nurse. Um, it's also with Ingram Sparks, so for retailers to be able to purchase, but probably the easiest for, someone to just buy it, it would be Amazon.
Perfect. And I'll make sure and put that in the show notes. And now that we're coming to an end, I just wanted to thank you so much, Lisa, and ask you, is there anything else that you would like to add before we end this chameleon chat?
I think just I think it's exciting to be connecting with people. It makes me hopeful and mindful for the whole adoptee and adoption constellation community, because once we start talking, more folks are talking. And I think I'm thankful and I'm grateful to be in this space in the time that I am. I wish we could have been in this space a long time ago, but I'm really, really happy to be a part of this and raising awareness. I think it's a real exciting journey, and I think it's going to help a lot of us. I think it's going to help a lot of folks who are touched by adoption and all the different ways that folks are touched. I think there is a lot of work to be done and a lot of improvement, and I'm excited to hopefully be a part of that.
Well, you absolutely are. You are on this journey, and I'm excited to stay in touch with you and to hear more about your training and how you're implementing it into the medical field, because that is super exciting. I know having a trauma informed nurse practitioner, and that would be, someone that I could talk to during a mammogram and things like that would be so valuable. I mean, it's really important when you can talk to somebody and you feel safe with them, because yeah, it's not always out there. So
No.
thank you so much for doing that. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for talking with me today.
Yeah, thank you for agreeing to talk to me. I really appreciate it.